Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on where you are and when you are listening to this. So let's get right into it. The murder of Reeva Steenkamp. Now, just before we get right into it, that was a little snippet from my new cover of Betty Davis Eyes, which, as I mentioned on my last stream, will be coming out tomorrow at the end of the day in full. I've just got to finish the mixing up of it, and then we'll have the full track out for you all to listen to. And I'd like to say as well, thank you all very much for showing your support on the last stream about the dark side of adult entertainment. That's already my most viewed stream I've ever done. Last time checking about 550 views, which it isn't really why I do it, but it's nice to know that like what I'm saying, what I'm advocating for is being heard by some people, and it is hopefully having an impact. So let's get right into it. Hi Jay, I just wanted to say I hope you have a great live. I'm listening at a crystal store with my mom and sister right now, but we'll be listening. Oh, thank you so much, Val, for making it and saying hi, even though you're out and about with your family. Say hi to your mother and your sister from me. And I hope you have a really nice time crystal shopping. I've got my quartz crystals here in my room on my little altar over by my bed. So yeah, please send me some pictures if you do pick up any crystals. I'm very interested in them. And thank you so much for making it. Oh, hi everybody. Hi Amber, glad you could make it. And I'm glad you like the music as well. Yeah, we'll have a full cover of that open and available for you all to listen to in the coming days. So I hope you'll keep an eye out on that. But right now, I'm going to get straight into the true crime. So, so Reeva Steenkamp, this is who was murdered by Oscar Pistorius. So Reeva Steenkamp, who is she, or who was she? She was born in Cape Town, South Africa, but was raised in Port Elizabeth, South Africa. She was a dedicated student and she earned a Bachelor of Law degree from Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University in South Africa. She applied for the bar with the ambition of becoming a legal advocate for abused women and girls and children. So she was a really pretty woman, but she also had brains as well. She's also a very smart woman. And a big part of who she was helping others who were coming from adversity, because as a child she actually spent time uh, unable to use her legs, and she was able to recover. I think it was an accident she was in or some kind of medical issue, but this is ultimately what bonded her and Pistorius initially. That they shared adversities in the physical mobility department, but she was able to overcome them, thankfully. She gained significant fame as a model as well as being a qualified lawyer. She worked as the first face of Avon in all of South Africa, so that's a huge deal. Avon came to Africa. First country they came to was South Africa, and she was the face of it. The second they came to the place, she was the first person to be the face of Avon in South Africa. So a huge deal. Her world was, taking off and getting better and better and better, and it's just great. It's just a great life that she was living, and and growing into, and she also appeared on the cover of FHM magazine and did modeling internationally. So she did modeling outside of South Africa, got to go to Europe and North America too, I think. So she got to see the world all through her modeling talents, which is amazing. It gives you a chance to go out there and see the world. And also she has this really strong had this really strong view of wanting to go and protect women, defend the vulnerable, defend children, and advocate for victims of abuse, and also have that social conscience and that brain, as well as the beauty. It goes hand in hand. These days, I think models are, a model that is, has something to say, as well as being pretty, is a lot more, I think, sought after in our society than one that may just be pretty and not have a lot to say. So she certainly was, you know, she had the best of both worlds. She really had things going for her. Hi Diva girl, glad you could make it too, and thank you for your I'm thankful for your comment on my my post announcing the live, and that you'd already heard about this case and watched a documentary on it. So I'd just like to hear your view. Val, if you're still able to chat, no worries. If you're not, I know you're out and about, and I really appreciate you listening and making it, because you always make my stream so much better. I always feel so much more confident when you're around. I don't know why. Yeah, Amber, I'd love to hear from you as well. If you've heard of this case before, sorry, Reeva Steenkamp and Oscar Pistorius case. Yeah, I remember when it happened vividly. Actually, fun fact, it's the first trial that I followed day by day. I remember watching it day by day with my father. The trial was going on. It was some kind of school holiday. I was on holiday from high school, and either summer or some kind of we would call them half term breaks or semester breaks, as you call them over in the States, or here in the States, should I say? And but I wasn't obviously in the States then. But yeah, I was on break from school and I actually watched the trial day by day with my father, and it's actually the catalyst of what got me into trial watching. I'd been interested in true crime before then, but was just really watching documentaries. But the Oscar Pistorius trial was the first trial that I watched day by day, because prior to him murdering his girlfriend, he was a massive hero of mine. I remember watching him on television at the London Olympics, and in the Olympics and the Paralympics, and he was the first ever person to be in both the Paralympics and the able-bodied Olympics. And he'd done so much. He was such an inspiration to people who had to overcome difficulties in sports, or had a tough background, and persevered. That's what he represented to me. So I was absolutely shocked and horrified when it came out that he'd done what he'd done, and I just couldn't believe it. And I watched the trial, and the first trial, and the subsequent appeals as well, years later, that we'll get into. But as the evidence was coming out, I was just horrified to see what he was actually like as a person, and I didn't for 1 second believe his pathetic defences. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you're still here, Val. I'd love to hear if you've heard about the case, Val. Never heard of it, but curious. Yeah. I think it got a lot of attention, like internationally, but I think the main source of attention that was going on to outside of South Africa was from other Commonwealth countries. So when I say Commonwealth, like the British Commonwealth, so like countries that used to be part of the British Empire that still kind of have a relationship with Britain, so like Australia and other places like India. You know what I mean? Like the story was big in former British colonies, basically, because those are the places South Africa seems to have quite good bonds with. So it was covered everywhere. It was pretty widespread, the coverage, because he was very famous back in 2012 or 2013 when it happened. He was like one of the the standout guy. He was the most famous Olympian there ever was, the most famous Paralympian there ever was, and one of the most famous Olympians there ever was. He was a first. He was a trendsetter. He broke the barrier to where you could not be able-bodied but still run in the able-bodied Olympics, so long as there was no clear advantage that you had, and he broke that. So yeah, it really was a starting point of my trial watching career. And me and Val, obviously, as I've mentioned on the channel before, we watched both the Karen Reid trials daily. You know what I mean? I don't think we missed a day, Val, on the Karen Reid trials, and I just find it so exhilarating to watch trials day by day. I find it so fun, and hopefully one day yeah, I can go in the public gallery of a high profile trial, and I'd love Val to be there as well, because I know she'd really get off on it and find it a great experience. So I'd really like that. And Amber, I think would be amazing for you to go and check out a court case. I know you've got your hands full with your family, and I know Val, you've got your hands full as well. But I think one day, like it'd be great for for any one of yous really to go and check out a court case, in the public gallery, to watch it in person. I've always wanted that greatly, and it's always been a big aspiration of mine. So back to Reeva. Prior to her death, she was committed, as I said earlier, to female empowerment and social causes and betterment projects. She was actually due to give a speech at a refuge for women and girls who are at risk of human trafficking the day before she was found murdered. And her family established a foundation in her honor after her death to combat gender-based violence, which is it's such a shame that she had to die so young. But that the creation of that foundation is her legacy, and it carries on the work that she wanted to do in life. It carries that on in death and keeps her name remembered for what she stood for and what she was about, which is a really beautiful thing to come out of a really horrific situation. And I'm sure her foundation has helped a lot of women get out of some really difficult and dangerous situations. So it sucks that she had to go so early, and but at least in the afterlife she's still carrying on her good works. You know what I mean? I really do feel that. Uh, and she was shot and killed by boyfriend Oscar Pistorius on the early hours of Valentine's Day 2013 at their Pretoria home in South Africa. After an argument, Steenkamp had locked herself in the bathroom, and neighbours had heard shouting. And so, like, it had to be really loud for neighbours to hear shouting, because they're not in some semi-detached home. It's in a very big house. They had their own kind of private estate, so it had to be very loud for neighbours, quite a ways to be able to hear them. And Pistorius fired 4 shots into the locked bathroom, hitting Reeva in her arms, head, and hip. Pistorius then used a cricket bat to smash open the door and then sought medical help, but she died at the scene. So it's pretty absurd for him to try and seek medical help and all that type of stuff when he was the one who did it. And it really is absurd in my view. And now we get on to the murderer, Oscar Pistorius, and who we mentioned earlier. He was born in 1986 in Pretoria, with a congenital absence of the fibula in both legs. So his lower legs were amputated below the knee before his first birthday. So he learned to walk and compete using carbon fiber prosthetic blades, earning him the nickname the Blade Runner. Uh, he won 6 gold medals across the Paralympic Games, starting in Athens 04, then to Beijing in 08, and then finally in London 2012. And as I mentioned earlier, he won a legal battle to where he was able to race in the able-bodied Olympics as well in London 2012, and finished one of the last, I think, in the able-bodied Olympics. But nonetheless, it was a huge achievement. And he also, won gold in the Paralympics. So, he was happy with what he'd achieved. And takes us to the night, though, of the murder. He had been dating Steenkamp for only 3 months, but they did live together. And he claimed that he mistook Steenkamp for a burglar and fired in self-defense. He said that they had been arguing, but then they went to bed with each other. He had his legs off. He got out of the bed to go downstairs to, I think, open a window or get some water was his excuse. One of the two, because he was hot. So I think he was going out to get the fan in from outside so that they could feel cooler in the home is his excuse. And he said that when he was outside trying to get the fan from the balcony, he then heard noises from the bathroom, and he quickly went to arm himself in the bedroom. Didn't see where he had his handgun, where he didn't see where he didn't see anything. Uh, he said he couldn't see where Steenkamp would have usually been because of the darkness, and he didn't want to turn on the lights as to alert potential intruders. So he said he assumed Steenkamp was still asleep. He didn't want to wake her to cause her fear, and then went and got the gun and directly went to the bathroom. Instead of shouting or asking who it was, he just opened fire because he said he was in fear, and he said that he wasn't on his prosthetic, so he was extra vulnerable, and acted out of fear. And uh, originally, he was only sentenced, get this, to 6 years, and because the female judge, not a male judge, the female judge even, she said that she believed his story, that he acted out of self defense because he believed that the person in the bathroom was an intruder. And obviously South Africa has a very high violent crime rate, and firearms are prevalent throughout the legal and illegal markets. So he used that to his advantage, and he also used his disability to his advantage to garner sympathy from the judge. And in South Africa, they got rid of jury trials in the new country when the Republic of South Africa was formed after white rule ended in South Africa. Uh, they got rid of jury trials, so there are judges, and judges decide the verdict on their own. But have two assessors. Like, the assessors are people from the local community, so they're kind of like a jury. They kind of like they advise the judge and what their own perspective is, and the judge considers the views of the assessors, but does ultimately have the right to disregard them under South Africa law. So I'm a bit skeptical about any system that doesn't allow you to be tried by a jury of your peers. I've strongly believed that such systems where there is, the power is all vested into one person, are ripe for corruption. And I personally feel that it's very possible that the judge in Pistorius's first trial was bribed by him to lay down the 6 year sentence, which is an appalling sentence for a man who murdered a young woman, and who and to be handed down by a woman herself, I think, is the greatest betrayal. However, thankfully, after extensive appeals, the Supreme Court in South Africa found him guilty and sentenced him to 13 years and 5 months in prison. Okay, it's murder, it's more time, but he actually got the lowest possible time you could get for murder in South Africa, which was 15 years, but it was reduced to 13 years and five based on time served, but was ultimately released on parole after only serving 9 years in January 2024. So Reeva Steenkamp's life was worth 9 years to the South African judiciary. I find that absolutely appalling. And what kind of message does this send in a country that already has a plague of violence against women, where women getting murdered by their partners or their husbands is very, sadly, very commonplace? And what kind of message does this send when the most high profile, internationally recognized example of femicide, of matricide, well, they weren't married, but femicide in the country is one that only the perpetrator only receives a 9 year sentence for, well, only does 9 years in prison for, and is out now and lives under so-called tight supervision at his uncle's sprawling country estate. His probation conditions include include sobriety rules, anger management courses, and a strict ban from talking to the media and going on social media. These conditions will be in place until December 2029. Again, absolutely outrageous. He murdered her uh, because he was abusing her, and her murder was the culmination of him, you know, increasingly trying to control every aspect of her and getting angry when she wouldn't submit to his control and his abuse. And that's sadly a cycle that we see repeated over and over and over again. And handing someone who does this 9 years and making them only do 9 years really isn't a deterrent. It just says to abusive husbands and boyfriends, if you're only going to get 9 years, you're only going to do 10 years for taking her life, so you may as well, you know what I mean? So it sets a really dangerous precedent. And if South Africa is serious about combating violence and murder against women, they really need to look at themselves in terms of the sentencing they're giving, and also establish the fact that this is probably as a result of corruption, where his influence and his money are being used to create sympathy, and he is using his disability to gain sympathy also. And I think that that's just an offence and a damn insult to people who suffer like he does as paraplegics, not paraplegics, as people who can't, use their legs without prosthetics. It's such a terrible. It makes them look terrible. You know what I mean? He's using something that is horrible to try and court sympathy for something evil that he did. You know what I mean? He should face the same repercussions as anybody else for what he did. He should have a minimum life sentence, because as Reeva Steenkamp's mother said, I'm serving a life sentence. I'll never get over this. I'll die and I'll be miserable about the fact that I had to bury my own daughter and it wasn't the other way around. I'm going to be suffering for life, and he was only in prison for 9 years, and he'll be off probation in about in 3 years. So he'll be able to go and do what he wants then, and it's just horrific. It's such a miscarriage of justice that this has been allowed to happen, and it's horrific. It really is, and like I said earlier, there is a strong possibility that Judge Thokozi Masipa, remember that name, the female judge's name from his first trial, was bribed, or one of the assessors was, and that's a name that should be forever shamed. She's a woman, a female judge, who was presented with clear evidence of a pattern of abuse, and his alibi of fearing a intruder was absolutely absurd. He acted recklessly and callously, and the testimony of neighbours that they'd heard loud arguments beforehand. It only highlights this more. It's less circumstantial. It's glaring you in the face, the reality of what this is, and shame on that judge, that female judge who only found him guilty of a lesser charge of manslaughter and gave him 5 years, which is horrific. And I mean, and in reality, he only did 4 more years than that when he got the murder charge. But still, it's absurd. The whole thing, I'm not happy with any of this, really. And hi, Adrian, glad you could make it. And anyone still anyone still watching, please share your thoughts and engage in the chat if you can. The judge in the first trial argued that the lack of prosthetics on that he had on when he shot her made him in a fearful and anxious state, and that he would have been more likely to assume that there was some kind of burglar or home invasion situation. But logic would say that, like, when he went back to the bedroom after going outside on the patio to get the fan, as he said, if you were to believe his story, like, of course, like if he suspected there is an intruder, I said earlier, he said maybe he didn't want to cause fear in Reeva, that there was a intruder and that she might scream or like alert them of where they are. But it doesn't make much sense to me that he was able to go in, get the gun from under his bed. It wasn't even in a safe; it was under his bed, which is, not really in keeping with South Africa law. I'm pretty sure you've got to have your guns stored safely. So even then, like him saying that he couldn't see her, it really there is a few holes in that. You know what I mean? And they have gone through the house and reenacted things, and let's just say he's lying. He would have seen whether she was not there or there, and it's absurd for him to immediately jump to intruders over it being Reeva when, the pattern is there is an argument. She went and locked herself in the bathroom. That happens a lot when couples argue. One, runs off and locks themselves in the bathroom, has a good cry, whatever. So that what the narrative of they had an argument, she locked herself in the bathroom, he got pissed by something she said, and got his gun and murdered her. That seems way more likely to me objectively than the yarn he's trying to spin. So why that judge bought that and had a lot more sympathy for him, I'll never know, but I suspect money certainly plays a part in this. And because South Africa isn't a very rich country, and people in positions like judges and other politicians and things don't really get the amount of money that they do in the West. So you got someone like Pistorius who had deep pockets and still does. Any South African will tell you, and I've known many South Africans, that you can buy your way out of pretty much anything in South Africa, and that's been the case for a long time. You can pretty much buy your way out of anything, which to me, it seems like that's the case everywhere, really, but it seems a lot more blatant in South Africa. The fact that we were only dating for 3 months and he murdered her, and he already murdered her. Exactly. It's terrifying. And you'll hear from his ex that he was actually cheating on his ex with Reeva. And you'll hear that, his pattern of abuse was, basically the same with her. And that she feels like she could have easily have been, killed by him, and been in the place of Reeva, had they not, broken up, and then he, took more of an interest in Reeva. So yeah, it really is crazy that it happened so quick. But I think with guys like him, with this kind of real, deep, problems inside, these deep senses of inferiority and trust issues that then manifest themselves into violence, and threats of violence. It's really really concerning. And if guys who are like that, they don't address these issues, that they're just going to get worse and worse and worse over time until eventually they do kill somebody. And it's a tragic thing, and I hope at the very least these cases and cases like it can raise awareness on abuse in relationships, and that if you feel under threat or at risk or unsafe, you really have to get away from that person no matter what they say, and you have to you have to tell them, and be clear with them, like Reeva did, but despite that, she still tried to see the best in Oscar, and he took advantage of her good nature and her forgiving nature, and he murdered her in a really brutal and horrible way. Not that there's a nice way, but yeah, particularly evil how he did it. And then the Supreme Court said in their judgment, they said that 6 years does not match the gravity for taking human life. And I would argue that 13 years and 5 months doesn't match the gravity for taking human life. I would argue that if they're not going to have the death penalty anymore in South Africa, which they haven't since the new state was founded in the early 90s, they should at least give life imprisonment, because South Africa has such a terrible crime problem, all kinds of crimes. It really went from being, the richest nation in Africa and the most, developed nation in Africa to being basically a third world hellhole. And it's got horrific crime statistics and horrific statistics on domestic violence and sex crimes and murders of women, and cases like this where it's, uh, it's put into international awareness and in the public eye. Like I said earlier, don't do well and don't do anything good to try and curb the problem in South Africa and all over the world. And he had, like I said, he had a history of anger and infidelity against his partners. He had a history of reckless gun use. He fired a hole into his car's sunscreen after being stopped by police for speeding. So he was stopped for speeding by the cops, drove off after getting the ticket, and then after the cops had disappeared in anger, there with his ex-girlfriend Taylor, he fired into the through the roof in a fit of rage. So it just shows you that he had a history of using firearms in a very flippant way. He also, as well, accidentally apparently shot one of his friends in the leg, in the foot, I think, when they were out at a bar, and they were just playing around with guns. So it's clear to see that Pistorius didn't take gun safety very seriously. Was used guns flippantly, and would, I think, used it as a substitute. But I think he felt powerless, and whenever he felt powerless or angry, he went to the gun. You know what I mean? He would pull the gun on Steenkamp. I wouldn't be surprised if he had a history of of pulling guns on her. In text messages that were found and read out in open court. It was said that Steenkamp said that she didn't feel safe around him, which is awful. Your partner is supposed to be, your partner's supposed to be the one who's protecting you. You know what I mean? Who you can trust is gonna, who would die for you. You know what I mean? Who would be willing to lay their life on the line for you. And I know for the woman I love, I would be more than willing uh, to do that. You know what I mean? And I like the idea that you could say you love somebody, but treat them the way he treated her. I don't understand how what these people, what these guys, and what some women can be like as well. Like how like Amber Heard, you know what I mean? Like how they think that that is in any way love to do. It's horrific, and it's really sad, and it just shows you how dangerous some people are out there, and how they can, they said that apparently the relationship started off like really lovey-dovey, but like pretty quickly he showed his dark side, and his controlling kind of volatile nature, where he just insults her and degrade her and make her feel like shit, and talk about how he thought her accent was stupid and made her sound poor, and that he didn't like it, and that he didn't like how she dressed. He said she dressed slutty, which is horrific. She was a very beautiful woman, and as a man, you should be, want your partner to dress how she wants to dress, and if she wants to dress sexy, be happy for it. You know what I mean? Because she's dressing sexy for you, and for herself. But like, let's be real. It's insecurity. That's what it is, and it's him feeling like he's less of a man, and I think that that's related to deep personal problems that he has, psychological problems that he never bothered to address, and that's a theme of a lot of these recent streams that I've been doing, like Ariel Castro, where people have deep seated mental problems, psychological problems that are never addressed, and then the symptoms of them, the negative sides of them, well, they're all really negative, but the really seriously negative sides of them keep occurring, keep coming up, but and keep getting worse. And I think his inferiority complex was rooted in, his disability. I think that he felt less of a man, and that, Steenkamp and other potential partners of his, were always liable, and it was always likely that they were going to disappear and leave him for a man that, had both legs. And I think he, which is ridiculous, because Steenkamp, seemed like she really loved him for him, and for him and for what he'd been through, and for who he was, you know what I mean? And he was just too much of an idiot to see it. And instead of, giving that love back to her, he just well yes he was, but like, I guess less of a, less like inferior type of thing, inferior to other men, you know what I mean? And not as desirable as a partner. So like, I think that that's what it was that made him like that. And he was so blinded by this delusions and this paranoia that he couldn't see what a good thing he had going, you know what I mean? He couldn't see how lucky he was, and he couldn't see anything good in himself. And instead of, trying to address these issues, he just took them all out on the woman who loved him and who cared about him. And it's yeah, he's a murderer. Yeah, it's fine, it's fine. You're accurate, though, it is true. But yeah, I meant in the more uh in the sense of, like, capability wise, and things like that. So yeah, but yeah, I appreciate you saying it, and you're gonna get no condemnations from me for taking a shot at him. He murdered a woman, for God's sake, and he only did 13 years. He only did 9 years for it. He got sentenced to 13, and only did 9. And it's ridiculous. And I think, despite his, supposed courses that he has to go through, he will probably do this again. I will not be surprised if he does it again. And of course it'll be his fault, but blame will also have to be laid on the South African legal system for giving him such a slap on the wrists for such a serious offence as murder, which is what they declared it to be. Murder, not manslaughter, as was first ruled. Murder. And the minimum term you can get for murder in South Africa is 15 years, and he got less than that, and did even less than that. So it's absolutely outrageous, and the case stinks of corruption. And if Pistorius had been man enough to actually address his demons, he would never have done all this. It would never have gotten to this stage. But you let things fester and fester and fester, and you don't address issues you have in relationships, or the way you see yourself, or what have you. You're just going to be doomed to a miserable, pathetic life, and that's what he's doomed to. And he's got no one else to blame other than him. And there was, just talk of Steam Camp, maybe, talking to other men. But, if that was the case, obviously it doesn't justify him doing what he did, of course. And the reality is, if that was true, uh, he was the one pushing her into the arms of other men by the way he was treating her. You know what I mean? He wasn't treating her how she deserved to be treated. So, like, what do you expect? Glad you're still here, Val. And it's like, what do you expect? He was treating her like shit, and maybe she was looking for guys that wouldn't treat her like shit. And she'd been dating a rugby player from the Springboks, which is the South Africa's national rugby union team. And they're like, obviously rugby union is like a major sport in South Africa. It's probably and it's one thing rugby union as well that that doesn't divide, that unites a highly divided country. You know, black, white, mixed race, Indian, all the other groups in South Africa. They all unite over their love of the Springboks. So, in times of struggle, in times of difficulty for South Africa, the national rugby team has always been a unifier and a stabilizer. So, it doesn't surprise me that, and I think she'd already been with this guy who she was chatting with before Pistorius. And I think that is probably. I think he was looking through her phone on the Valentine's Day, and he just snapped, and they had the arguments, and he said, "What the fuck are you doing?" And then she probably would have been like, "After the way you've been treating me, I probably just wanted to speak to someone who wasn't going to talk to me like shit and make fun of me, call me a whore for what I'm wearing." And make fun of my accent, and just wanted to be treated nicely by someone. And like in his complete, narcissism, and I know it's an overused word, but I think it's pretty appropriate for this situation, like refused to see how he caused all of this and how it is all his fault. No, he, took it all out on Reeva. It's ultimate form of cowardice, and it's really, really evil. And I'm really pissed off that he only did 9 years, because, like I said, women of South Africa and the world, beware. He's out now. He's on parole, and his parole conditions will be lifted by Christmas 2029. So not that far away, and he will certainly, more than likely, do this again. I think he has no remorse. I think his crying, his all this was about the fact he knew his career was over. I think he didn't give a shit about Reeva Steenkamp and her life. Yeah, Val. I didn't know if you'd heard it earlier. I know you've been out and about, and send me any crystals. Send me a picture of any of the crystals you get. I'd love to see them, and I'll send you some pictures of my crystals. I don't think I ever have before, and I'd really like to see that. Say hello to the fam for me as well, and the babies. But yeah, 9 years. It is really messed up. You people get more for drug fucking trafficking. You know what I mean? People get more for like. People get more for ridiculous things. You know what I mean? Like. It's absurd, to say that her life was only worth 9 years, and he wasn't doing hard time. He had a pretty easy go of things, and he was bribing all the other inmates to, make it nice and easy for him, and do all the shit he had to do for him. So the precedent that sets, like I said earlier, in South Africa, a nation that already has incredibly high rates of violence against women and homicides committed by men against women, usually partners of those women. This is the most internationally known example of that type of case from South Africa. And this is the message that they're sending to the South African people. This is the message they're sending to the world. If you kill your partner, if you, after domestically abusing it, and timeline of abuse, if you kill women, you'll get less than a decade. You know what I mean? You do it when you're 30, you'll be out before you're 40. Like, what kind of preventative measure is that? It's really insulting. He should have gotten life. And as I said earlier, Reeva Steenkamp's mother says, I'm serving life. I'll be miserable until the day I die because of the fact that I had to bury my own daughter, not the other way around. So yeah, I don't get parole. I don't get to, have a break from all this at any point. It's my daily reality. And it's just horrific that the legal system in South Africa has given him so much leniency, and he's been able to, you know, basically go through a really easy time of things in behind bars, and so at first they were even talking of maybe just giving him home detention, which is outrageous. Like, when have you ever heard of a case of a murder committed by a partner against their partner where there's this level of lackadaisicalness to the sentencing, where there's this lack of care about the seriousness of it all. You know, it really, really angers me that he is out now, and there are people who have done, you know, far less than what he's done in South Africa and all over the world, who are doing a lot longer sentences than that, you know, and or doing the same sentence of 9 years, but have done something a lot less, you know, like small scale drug dealing, you know, or something like that, in some slum community, as South Africa has many, and people are doing these things to survive. You know what I mean? Not to be, you know, parasites. So yeah, there's people who are doing the same time as him who have literally murdered nobody and never harmed anyone physically. So it really is absurd to me, the way they reacted to it, whether it's because he's a celebrity, whether he paid them loads of money, who knows. But all eyes are on South Africa for that first trial and the subsequent appeals, but mainly the first trial. And it sent such a terrible message to the rest of the world, you know. That it really isn't a place, South Africa, anymore, where I would advise women to go, because it seems like, you know, the high rates of violence against women, the high rates of assaults and sexual assaults against women, and it seems like even when the perpetrators, you know, it's in, you know, international media, and the pressure would be on, or should have been on, for them to give a tough sentence to send a message. They just fold. They just folded initially, even with a female judge in the first trial, and gave him only 6 years for manslaughter. You know, and only due to public outcry and backlash, the appeals court picked it up, and they realised, you know, we really need to modify this because it's making us look bad. And it wasn't, like I said, motivated out of any kind of outrage or feeling out of care for Steenkamp's family. It was just done out of, you know, pressure, you know, and that's terrible. You know, the law and order and the legal system should be there to protect, but also punish those, you know, proportionately for what they do. You know, a string of robberies and thefts, you know, that could net you 9 years. You know, you can't be putting people who commit, you know, petty theft or breaking and entering or burglaries, with, you know, without any kind of physical violence, you know, in the same category as Pistorius, who took a woman's life, you know, in cold blood as well. He There was no crimes of passion, because, let's be real about it, he never loved her. I don't think he can really love anybody properly, because I think his definition of love is very skewed, and very. I think his idea of love is control, and that isn't love. That is abuse. You know what I mean? So love isn't about control. It's about um, balance, and it's about understanding the other person and respecting their feelings and their wishes as much as they respect yours, and not trying to force them to be anything. Loving someone is loving them for who they are, not trying to shape them in your own will. You know, that isn't love. That isn't love. And you know, I guess it's the curse of people like that, that they never will understand love. They never will understand what true love and what a healthy romance and a relationship feels like. And I don't feel sorry for them, you know what I mean? Because they have the choice to take steps to, you know, improve their own mental state and the way they see the world, but they just fundamentally refuse to. And then it culminates in horrific tragedies like this that never needed to happen. You know, just happening. You know, and a young woman who had so much going for her. You know, she was a fully trained and qualified lawyer. She, you know, specifying in rights of women and girls, and the trafficked and the abused. And she was obviously, like I said earlier, a very prominent model, and a very well respected and well loved model. You know, he really took, uh, you know, someone who was doing an overwhelming amount of good away from the world, and he's a really evil bastard for that. and I won't call him anything else, you know. And it's it really worries me that this precedent has been set out, and to be honest with you, it just highlights as well that corruption is everywhere in the world, in the legal system at the moment, and that sadly it's the case in America and Britain and Ireland and everywhere else, as well as South Africa, that there is a law and legal framework for the quote unquote normal people, and then there's a legal framework and a law system for the people of power and influence and money. And that is why our world is basically in such a dysfunctional state. We have people who are evil, who are never being held fully accountable for their acts. And evil flourishes when good men and women do nothing. And that's what I'm saying to you, everyone who's listening now or who listens in the replay. We can't sit back and let unfair lenient sentences be handed down, or no sentences at all for people who commit crimes, violent crimes against men, women, or children. And we, no matter who they are, no matter what they've done, nothing will ever excuse murder. You know, in a sense where it's murder, where there is and there's been abuse and it's cold blooded, and you know there's no self defense or anything like that. No amount of, you know, running or charity work or money will excuse what he did. He committed femicide. You know what I mean? He murdered his partner after a prolonged period of abuse and control, and nothing will take away from that's what he is. He's an abuser of women. He's a murderer. He's a scumbag, and that's what his legacy should be. Not that he was a Paralympian hero, not that he did all these great things. You know what I mean? Like in my view, it's gone. He isn't my hero. He isn't one of my heroes anymore. He made that decision to stop being the hero of me and of many others, and to become a murderer and an abuser. And that's a choice that everybody has. You know, they choose this. You know what I mean? It isn't Reeva's fault. And there's some fucking idiots, you know, who I've seen that have said, "Oh, she was talking to a rugby player. He had every right to do that." You know, like these are people who would probably feel quite at home in the medieval times, where women were stoned frequently and drowned frequently for just being a little different or not so easy to control. And if they want to live in that type of world, there are countries, sadly, that are still very much like that. And I suggest that they go and fuck off there, and stop trying to drag our civilization and our society down with their nonsense. Uh, you know, I doubt they'd say that type of thing if it was their sister or their mother that was killed. I'm, that's a sad aspect of this case, that you do find people who do defend him on those lines, and I'll never be able to understand that type of thing, and I'm glad I don't. But we'll be wrapping it up soon, and I'm glad and thankful for everybody who's stuck around and who's been so interactive in the chat. Val, thank you so much for, you know, making the effort to chat, even though you've been out with your family crystal shopping, and it really means a lot to me that you've made the effort to come here and say hi. You know, it means the world to me to see you in my streams. It really does, and I hope we can chat a bit after this, and you can show me some of the crystals that you've seen, and hopefully some pictures of Freddie. Not Freddie. That's of Henry Jr. Yeah, Freddie was my old cat, sadly, the one that passed away before we knew each other. So I get Freddie and Henry mixed up sometimes. So Henry Jr. I'd love to see you know, pictures of Henry Jr. son of the cat that you have. So yeah, I can't wait for that. If you're able to, no pressure at all. If you're too busy, that's cool. But yeah, thank you, Val. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Diva Girl. Thank you, Amber. Everybody who's been in here. I really appreciate you all for sticking with me. I know this is a case that's quite, old, but to me it's really important to shine a light on this type of thing. He did get a really lenient sentence for a really horrific murder that was the culmination of domestic abuse, and he got off way too lightly, and this should be an example of how cases like this shouldn't be prosecuted and how they shouldn't be done. I think uh, there has to be mandatory life sentences for these type of things if people aren't going to have the death penalty, because anyone who's able to go and do that will do it again. uh, he hasn't learned the error of his ways. Uh, as far as I'm concerned, he feels no remorse. He feels like he's the one that's wrong. And it's major warning to any woman who potentially may get with Oscar Pistorius in the future. Do you want this to happen to you? You know what I mean? Don't think that you're going to be the exception. He's like this, and he'll always be like this because he doesn't have it in him to want to change. So he doesn't have it in him to confront the realities of what he's done and why he's done them. He still maintains that it was an accident. You know what I mean? He hasn't held his hands up and given a full confession. So he'll never learn. He'll never change, and he'll be doomed to repeat this pattern again. And I sincerely hope that no woman is unlucky or unfortunate enough to be manipulated by him, and then ultimately be victim of his abuse and essentially his violence and a murder at his hands. I really hope that no other woman falls victim to him, and that he lives the rest of his days without any female companionship, and just gets to wither away like the loser that he is. Winners don't go and murder the women that they love. Losers do that. Winners get help when they realize they've got significant issues with relationships and significant problems with self-belief, self-worth, and figure out where that comes from and do something about it. That's what winners do. Losers do what he did. So don't be like Oscar Pistorius. Don't be a loser. Be a winner like Reeva Steenkamp, because her legacy is that of a woman who stood up for women and girls and children who were vulnerable and who didn't have a voice. And it's just awful and such a sad thing that there was no one who stood up for Reeva, and there was no one in the in South Africa's legal system who properly stood up for Reeva. The first judge, even despite the fact she was a female, didn't stand up for Reeva. Believed Oscar's bullshit, hook, line, and sinker. It really is a great betrayal. But she has the foundation in her name, and that will continue to serve and help women and girls who may be the victims of abuse or trafficking. And that she's still doing greatness and shining light from beyond the grave, and that is her eternal legacy. And it's really sad that we didn't get her for longer in the world, because I think she could have done amazing things if she wasn't taken away by that bastard. So that's where I'll finish off with everything. So thank you everybody for listening to my thoughts on this. And it's another case that I feel is difficult to talk about, but important to highlight. As you've noticed, maybe on the channel, I've been covering subjects that deal with social issues like domestic violence, sexual abuse, physical abuse, things like that, and isn't just focused on the victims being female. Obviously anyone, male, female, can be victims, but I think I've been focusing more on that recently, because I think I'm becoming more comfortable and open discussing my own experiences in childhood with abuse, at the hands of sadly a female, and so I that doesn't make that makes me aware of I think abuse and things like that, and how that works, and the effects of it, and the fact that I'm coming to terms with how that's affected my life. It's just made me want to shine a light on it more in these situations more, because I know how important and serious it is, and how badly these things can turn out, and what this stuff can lead to. So I've been tackling social causes more recently, and before I leave as well, I'd just like to pay tribute to the fact that Reeva, she had such a short life, but she did so much, and that's the case with so many people. Sadly, they fit so many lifetimes into such a short life. So my parting message to you all would be, live every day like Reeva would. You know what I mean? Live your life to its fullest, and try to do things to not only better yourself but to better others as well. And that's the lesson that I've learned from Reeva Steenkamp, that it feels good to get help yourself, but also to try and help others, and be brave, and be strong, and be honest with yourself, and be honest with your friends and your family and your loved ones, and keep them close. And just and for those of you who may have been in domestic abuse situations or abuse of any kind, just know that it might seem dark, it might seem horrible, it might seem that you're condemned to never find someone who truly feels the way you do about them, and you'll never experience real love. Don't give up on it. Never give up on love. Love conquers all, and love is the most powerful thing in the world, and it is the most amazing thing in the world. And never give up hope. You will find that person who who makes life worth living for you, and basically their presence, their words, their smile can, just like I said, just the smile can take all that pain away, can help make you forget that any of that nastiness ever happened to you in the past. Can help you live in the moment and appreciate the beauty and the light in life. And lucky for me, I do have that. So you can too. So everybody, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. And keep an eye on the channel tomorrow, where my Betty Davis Eyes cover will be out in full, and I want to hear everyone's feedback on that, and what they think of it. So in case I don't see you, like I said, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, and goodbye. Thank you very much.